Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships. Today we're going to be doing an upgrade and commander build on the Tier 7 German battleship, the Gneisenau. First, as tradition, we need to discuss what type of battleship, what type of ship in general we're talking about. Well, yes, battleship, but what kind of battleship? Well, those of you who are familiar with the German tech tree line and the game itself, when they're right off the bat, we're talking more about a brawling battleship here. So if you're a newer player to the game, a brawling battleship usually means you fight at the closer to medium ranges. And Gneisenau excels in the brawling category at Tier 7. Not only does she have these 380mm guns, but in particular has decent secondaries. They have this secondary armament along the side with a range of 7.9, but we can bump that up over 9 kilometers across the ship. But also she gets torpedoes. And those are located, as you can see here, on the side of the battleship. Kind of swing over for you. So 2 sets of 3 on either side. So that really means you get to control your engagement at close range, which really helps you dictate the battle, especially if you're even tiered, matchmaking tier 7, or you're top tier. At bottom tier, though, you're going to struggle a little bit more in Gneisenau if you're versing tier 9. So let's first start off with the modules. You get the upgrades of the B hull upgrade, which gives you more health in addition to AA defense and some more maneuverability. And then the guns, you go from 17.8 kilometers to 19.5 kilometers. This is really helpful, especially when you are bottom tiered. And then you get your propulsion upgrade, where you go from 125,000 horsepower to 260,000 horsepower with a maximum speed of 33.6 knots. Consumable wise, you have your traditional damage control party, you have the repair party, and then you get access to choosing whether you want spotting, aircraft, and fighter. You can see I have the spotting aircraft mounted right now. With that 19.5 kilometer range, if you are bottom tiered versus tier 9, you're going to struggle a bit more in the sense of you have to get closer to ships with bigger guns, higher HE alpha that can do a lot of damage to you. So for now, I've liked running the spotting aircraft. I mean, maybe if you're doing ranked or something along those lines where you're going to be even tier matchmaking, then maybe the fighter makes more sense. But you won't need a fighter if you're tier 7 because it's not tier 7 aircraft carriers yet in the game. So honestly, you could swap back and forth in between spotting aircraft or the fighter. It really is up to you. Thus far, I've enjoyed using the spotting aircraft on Gneisenau. So upgrades. For first slot, you have main armaments modification, auxiliary armaments modification, and magazine modification 1. Not really going to touch on these two, just because I don't feel like they're needed. You can see I have main armaments modification 1. What this does is it reduces reduces the risk of your main battery and your torpedo tubes from becoming incapacitated by negative 20%, and it improves your main battery and torpedo tube survivability by plus 50%, and then your main battery repair time and torpedo tube repair time, if those modules armaments should be incapacitated, they will come back online much sooner and being repaired. So when you're brawling, it tends to help, especially with Gneisenau, since it's not only the main battery but also the torpedo tubes, which can get knocked out when players are focusing trying to HE spam your superstructure, destroyers or cruisers as an example. So I like running main armaments modification 1. Alternatively, I know some brawling players like to run the auxiliary armaments modification 1 because it increases your survivability of your secondary battery and AA mounts. You're more or less taking it for your your secondary battery, and able to keep those online longer because they can get knocked out. For slot 2, you have 2 options. You have the damage control system modification 1, and then you have engine room protection. Engine room protection, you normally run more on destroyers and cruisers. Some cruisers, not all, but definitely something you run on destroyers typically. But for battleships, you traditionally always take the damage control system modification 1 because it reduces your risk of catching fire and reduces your risk of flooding. You can see by -5% for fire, -3% for flooding. So anything you can help to improve your survivability and being a little bit more tanky since you're a brawling battleship is definitely welcomed. And then you have several options for the upgrade slot 3. You have main battery modification 2. This improves your main battery traverse speed. You have secondary battery modification 1. This extends your secondary battery firing range by plus 20% and reduces your shell dispersion by -20%, so meaning you're more accurate secondary battery. You have AA guns modification 1. This improves or reduces the priority AA sector preparation time. Then you have aiming systems modification 1. This improves your main battery shell dispersion, torpedo tube traverse speed, your secondary battery firing range by plus 5%, and dispersion by -5%. And then you get torpedo tubes modification 1, which just makes your torpedoes go faster, improves torpedo tube traverse speed, and reduces the risk of those torpedo tubes from becoming incapacitated. So on a brawling battleship that has good secondaries, which is more what the Germans' battleships do well, you take the secondary battery modification 1 as mounted here, which gets the range extended out to that. Right now we were showing 7.9 kilometers, but we can also extend that. I think I already had the signals mounted, but I'll show you. So you have your Mike Yankee Sockasix? I don't know how to pronounce that one. And what this does is that it helps improve your secondary battery, your firing range, reduces your main or secondary battery reload time, and your dispersion is reduced as well. So I usually always run this on my secondary battleships, Gneisenau, of course, as well. And we'll talk more about that range because in the commander build, we can get that range extended. Then in slot 4, you have damage control system modification 2. This reduces or accelerates fire extinguishing and recovery from flooding by -15% on both categories. You also have propulsion modification 1, time taken to reach full engine power when accelerating, -50%. Then you have steering gears modification 1, your rudder shift time is reduced by -20%. And then the airstrike modification 1, which your airstrike armament reload time is reduced, aircraft HP is improved, depth charge damage is also increased. This is for submarines. This is newer to the game, so submarines at this point in time, as of update 10.10, I'm recording this, are being more and more introduced into the game, so they added an armament upgrade option for you if you wish to take. You can see we've gone for the damage control system modification 2 because that syncs well with the damage control system modification 1. When you can accelerate the fire extinguishing time and the recovery from flooding, that means you're keeping more of your health pool intact, and you're going to be able to stay in the game longer because you will be set on fire. It's not if, it's just when in the game, and possibly flooding if there's torpedoes in the water as well. So again, you're improving your tank ability, your survivability as a brawling battleship, which is really important, and that's why I think this is the preferred upgrade to take over the other 3. So let's talk about the commander. So I've been training up a commander for the Grosse Kurfürst, as I'm currently grinding up the battleship line, German battleship line. So the commander I was running on the Gneisenau is now on my Bismarck, but I'll show you in yesterday's video the build I had. So we'll talk about some good options to take and also some possible alternative builds you could do as well. So this is what I'd recommend for a 10-point commander. For your first point, you want to take gun feeder, reduces the time taken to switch shell types when all main battery guns are loaded. So let's say you have armor piercing loaded and then there's a destroyer in the area and maybe you want to switch back to the HE. It's going to take you half the time So reloading right now is 26 seconds. So you have this. So you go from that 26 seconds to 13-second shell reload time. If you're full HP and don't have Adrenaline Rush taken, or some of the other skills we can talk about too. And then Grease the Gears, main battery traverse speed plus 20%. That brings our traverse speed for our main battery, 180-degree turn time, to 30 seconds. That's also really helpful. And then you could honestly go two ways to start off with your 10-point build. Usually what I will do, just because you're like, hey, I'm wanting to take a secondary build, you can start building down the secondary line. So you have long-range secondary battery shells. This extends your secondary battery firing range by plus 20%. So with that flag, combat signal mounted, you can see now we're at 9.5 kilometers. So this is helpful since your main battery, you only have 6 of those 380mm guns. So when you get ships within this range, it really helps. And then you could do the manual secondary battery aiming. So your secondary battery reload time is reduced by -10%. So now we can see we go from 3.8 seconds to 3.4 seconds. And then maximum secondary battery shell dispersion, -10%. And then the can be activated is that gradually increases secondary gun accuracy at priority target. When continuously firing at any target, accuracy decreases if the guns aren't used for 15 seconds or the priority target is changed. When the priority target is changed, 80% of accumulated accuracy is preserved. To set a priority target for secondary armament, press the left control, hover the cursor over an enemy ship, and simply press the left mouse key. So then you can see that maximum secondary battery shell dispersion when fired at priority target, -50%. Time it takes to reach maximum efficiency, 45 seconds. Before the commander rework that we had at the beginning of 2021, this was way simpler. It was just straightforward. This is your secondary battery reload time improve, and this is your manual secondary battery. It wasn't something that you had to accumulate over time, like the 45 seconds to reach full secondary accuracy. You just had it right at the get-go. So now it's a little more confusing, but it just takes time. So as your secondaries fire, they get more accurate. So you could build down a secondary line as your first 10 point, or you could go something like this. This is Fire Prevention Expert. So reduces the risk of catching fire. The maximum number of fires on the ship is reduced to 3. Risk of catching fire, -10%. So that goes along line with that damage control system modification 1. And a maximum number of fires, -1. So instead of having 4 fires on your ship, you can only have a maximum of 3. With Fire Prevention Expert, if you're newer to the game, let me explain that to you. Because you're like, hey, I never get 4 fires set on my ship, so why would I take it? Where Fire Prevention, what it does is it reduces the number of where those fires occur. So right now, without Fire Prevention, you have 1 on your bow, 1 on your forward part of your superstructure, 1 on the rear part of your superstructure, and then on the stern. What Fire Prevention does on top of reducing your risk of catching fire by -10%, it takes these 2 fires and combines it as 1. So a lot of destroyer players, cruiser players, when they're more HE oriented and are trying to set you on fire, the superstructure is always the first place they're going to go. So instead of ticking more damage and losing more of your health, with having 2 fires going, Fire Prevention really helps just having 1 fire, so you take less damage. So just only 3. 1, 2, 3 with Fire Prevention mounted. In the video yesterday, this was the build here that I had, that I showcased, Adrenaline Rush. It's a 3-point skill. What it does is it enhances the ship parameters for each 1% of your HP lost. So your main battery reload time, your torpedo tube reload time, your airstrike armament reload time, your secondary battery reload time, and continuous AA damage. All those outside of the AA damage get decreased. So as you lose health, your guns are going to be reloading faster. But as you lose health, your continuous AA damage goes up by plus 0.2%, but usually your AA is getting knocked out as the battle progresses when you lose health, so you can kind of think of maybe it's keeping you more even. But that's not always the case. It just depends. You tend to lose a lot of AA when you're brawling and you're pushing in. So this is why fire prevention, especially, is really helpful. And then also adrenaline rush. So you become basically more. It's called an attack skill. You become more dangerous as your health goes down to a certain extent because of your secondary batteries and all those armaments reloading quicker. So let's see. So this brings us to a 13-point build right now. So let's say you went secondary first. After you did this, I could see going fire prevention. So that'd be a 14-point build. And then going for the adrenaline rush skill. It's really up to you how you want to start off. I would say get to this point and then decide fire prevention, or if you just want to have get the most out of your secondaries from the get-go. That's the fun part, so that's why I tend to build down this first. Then go fire prevention, then adrenaline rush. And then you have emergency repair experts. So the action time of the damage control party consumable is extended by plus 10%. The number of damage control party consumable charges you get plus 1. You get unlimited damage control parties with this German battleship. I think the new German battleship line, you have a set number of charges. The Russian battleships only have a set number of charges. Their cooldown's quicker, but their action time is not as long. So you have a standard damage control party here. So you have unlimited number of those. The repair party consumable action time plus 10% and number of repair party consumable charges plus 1. So we go from having 4 heals to 5 heals. So I know in a lot of battles I've had, this would be very much appreciated. And this is my typical secondary build for the brawling battleship. So this would be something like I run on my Georgia, almost similar to what I run on my Massachusetts, so on and so forth. So this is what I'd recommend as a 21-point build. And so let's talk about some other options. So let's say you want to change things up. You want to be a little different. One of the things that some of the German commanders have, so let's say the Scharnhorst, I have Luchens on him right now. And I believe he has this improved skill. No, that is a different German commander I'm thinking of. But what I'm thinking of is this skill called Vigilance. So I need to actually see where it is. Right here. So Vigilance extends the torpedo acquisition range even while the hydroacoustic search consumable is active. Your torpedo acquisition range is plus 25%. Your torpedo protection and damage reduction is plus 7%. So you're not going to take as much damage. But when you take this skill, you detect torpedoes farther out. I know that there are, as you go up the line, there's a lot of favor for this. To me, I don't find as much favor on this because you don't have hydroacoustic search on your German battleship until you get to the Tier 8 Bismarck. I could see that making a little more sense there. But I do know that is something that players like to take. So you could drop your Grease the Gears if you want to take that instead. But I don't think it makes much sense to take this until you get to hydroacoustic search to the Tier 8 German battleship Bismarck. But note that is something to keep in mind as you're starting off. Let's see here. What are the other options we have? You also have close quarters combat. So let's say you just want a more aggressive build and giving up the emergency repair expert. This increases the reload of the main battery after an enemy has been spotted within the firing range of your ship's secondary battery. So as soon as an enemy ship is within 9.5 kilometers, since we're a full secondary build, your main battery reload time is reduced by negative 10%. So right now, our main battery reload time is 26 seconds. So if we take 10% off of that, we just go minus 2.6, you get down to 23.4 seconds. And I'm just confirming my math is correct. Like I said, if those of you who've been around for a long time know that I'm not skilled in the arts of math, but we just take 10% off, 2.6, and you're down to 23.4. You throw adrenaline rush in there, you can get that main battery down even more as you're losing health. So you could be, 22, maybe 21 second reload time on your main battery. So this is the much more aggressive. So I still believe fire prevention expert is more important over the emergency repair expert. Like if you're thinking, well, maybe I should do that. It's like, well, not necessarily, just because if you're seeking to be in close quarters combat constantly, then you want to be able to take less damage from fires, because there's so many things in the game that can set you on fire. This could be another build option there. I do not recommend that one. Let's see some other options. I'm just trying to see. This is a pretty good one if you're wanting to go for more of a tank build. Then the basics of survivability is helpful, because your module restoration time is negative 15%, and your fire extinguishing time, negative 15%, and your flooding recovery time, negative 15%. This is something you see more on tank-like battleships, so let's say the Russian battleships, because if you're doing a secondary build, you really want adrenaline rush just to make your secondaries and your main battery and torpedoes reload faster. So if you really wanted to take basics of survivability, I would say take this, and then you could do preventive maintenance. Reduces the risk of main turrets and torpedo tubes, steering gears, and engine from becoming incapacitated by negative 30%. Or you can add on to the emergency repair specialist. Reload time of the damage control party, negative 3%. Repair party consumable reload time, negative 3%. So those modules will come online a few seconds sooner than previously. This would probably be of the 3 builds I've shown you. Well, I've probably showed you closer to 4. This would probably be not as much recommended, because I think you get most bang for your buck with this build. It is the pretty straightforward secondary brawling battleship build. So to highlight the 3 builds, or however many it was I showed you real quick, you have this one. This is what I'd recommend first and foremost. If you want a more aggressive build, then I would recommend going this route. If you want more of a, per se, tank build, while with a hybrid mix of your secondaries, I could see going that way. I know I highlighted Vigilance, but I don't really feel like Vigilance makes sense until you get to the Tier A Bismarck. Again, without having that hydroacoustic search, it extends your torpedo acquisition range. So, my words a little slurred there. So why don't I take some of the other skills? So let's talk about that real quick, briefly. Demolition Expert, no, it's just not worth the 1 point. Consumable Specialist, no, it's only for spotting or fighter. So why would you take that? You're only going to get one of the 5 benefits listed here. We talked about Emergency Repair Specialist, Incoming Fire Alert. I mean, you're just going to see this going off constantly if you're a secondary build battleship. So to me, you should already be expecting incoming fire. So there's no need for that. We did touch on preventive maintenance as one of the 2 build items. IFHE, you do not need this. You're not crossing any important thresholds. And all this does is reduces your chance of your main battery or your secondary some chances of catching enemy ships on fire. You have Brisk, increases your ship speed while she remains undetected. Again, you can see I didn't even highlight Concealment Expert, so this goes pretty bad. Right now we're at 15.7, and then if I throw a camouflage on for you real quick, you'll see that will drop down. So now we're at 15.2. So when the build I run, my detectability, it's that 15.2. Vigilance, priority target. It's just better to have those 2 points invested in grease the gears. Because when you're inside the secondary range, typically when you're fighting enemy battleships, you should just be alert, looking around as you're fighting to see if there's other enemy ships targeting you. You have A defense and ASW expert, that's anti-submarine warfare expert. You're not so much, this is to me is just not 2 points worth this. There's other ships that could run this better. You have super heavy AP shells. This is a terrible skill. Please do not take this. Even though you get more AP shell damage out of your main battery, the cost is too high because it extends your fire extinguishing time and your flooding recovery time. Basically, it's going to take longer to put out the fire, longer to recover from the flooding. So it's just a terrible skill. Don't take it. You have improved repair party readiness. Improves the efficiency of the consumables each time your ship receives potential damage equal to 100% of the ship's base HP. So basically what they're saying is that your repair party is going to come online sooner as your potential damage goes up. To me, this just isn't worth it because you're investing 3 points into per se taking damage versus trying to protect your survivability and being a bit more tanky to a certain extent with some of the other build options I showed you. Focus fire training. This is a defense skill. This also I would not recommend taking on Gneisenau. There's other ships I think that could play this role better. You have Furious. It's a can be activated skill, so I tend to be a little more conscious on the can be activated skills because this one, it improves your ship's characteristics for each active fire on board your ship. So that basically means you want to have more fires so that your main battery reload time improves and dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship is increased, meaning their guns are not as accurate when they're firing on you. So if people do this build, it's something like this, because you don't want to take fire prevention, because the more fires, the more you're going to be able to pump out your DPM with your main battery. I think this is something more, it's a meme build like on Conqueror. It's a British tier 10 battleship, or maybe even Thunderer you would consider running this on, but it's definitely not a skill to be running on Gneisenau. And we've talked about all these skills except Concealment Expert. The new tech tree line of the German battleships, battle cruisers, they'll get more usage out of this just because your detectability is so poor. I mean, if you did take it, you can see we dropped down to 13.7. But then when you're in secondary fighting range, then this is 4 points to waste. So that is why these skills here would be more worth your while. So I hope this has helped you in just giving you my thoughts on the upgrade commander build of what I would run on Gneisenau. And what I have run thus far. When I started playing the game, my main focus was playing secondary battleships. So to me, this is the traditional secondary builds that I do, and I found a lot of success with them, and it's what you're going to find most players take. But we've highlighted some other options for you as we go down the tech tree line of the German battleship line. We're going to get into some other interesting build options. So Bismarck, then we have the FDG, and then the GK. So there'll be a few more things. So as I'm grinding down this line, I will continue doing upgrade and commander build videos on these ships. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you did not, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you are subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And we will catch you next time. Take care.